Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to Tiny Keyhole Minis. I'm Jolene, and today is going to be part 2 of creating the old lady in the Josephine house. So I'm going to be working on the forearms and the hands. It was a very long process. It took a lot of work and about a week. I worked on it about every single day. So I'm going to skip through a lot of the process, forward through a lot of it, but I'll explain what I'm doing. And also, it took several attempts, which I will not be showing in the video, but I did create a short. If you would like to see that, it's in my playlist. I did add some additional wrapping around the upper thigh and hip area, but tiny friends, I don't know about this fabric. I don't know how long it's really going to last. And I also added a glue solution, a thicker glue solution, to the ends where they're cut off, but I don't think it made much of a difference. I'm just afraid that later on down the road, the adhesive on the wrap, the bandage wrap, will get tacky and gunky, and it just isn't going to have a very long shelf life. So I'm going to add an additional layer of fabric, a really thin layer, maybe some cheesecloth, just for added security and a longer shelf life. So was this a good idea to use? I don't know. I really didn't find anything to help me out with the body wrap, so I just used what I had and thought would work. I did like using it as far as the process of the wrap, but I'm not sure about the longevity of it. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to add that additional fabric. I realized that I did not create the arms long enough for the armature. Technically, they should come down the thigh, and you can cut the excess off or what you don't need. And when we stand up, our hands fall down to about mid-thigh, almost to our knees. So I'm going to work with what I have here and get creative with that. Now I am going to talk about this hand because this is the cosplay hand that I created, and I want to show you the flexibility of it since I talked about it in part 1. I only baked this for about 15 minutes, less than the time on the instructions. So you don't want to overbake this, and for something so small, you definitely want to lessen the time because if you overbake it, it will be too hard and won't have any flexibility or resistance. But look at this flexibility. And I'm really afraid to do this, but it's really taken the tension very well. So if you want to try this, I'm just showing you how flexible this clay really is. I do really love this clay. I will be using it later on down the road. And this does not have a wire in it. I found that working with a wire for hands was quite difficult for me, and I definitely, for me, no wire because I can get a more feminine and smoother look to the hand. So for me, the wire does not work when creating hands. But this is what it looks like. And I'm also going to show you some joints that Gianna sent me as well. These joints came from MorezMore, and I'll put a link in the description box below. I really like these joints. I'm going to try these joints out. I am going to create another doll. I'm actually going to create a helping hand on the farm thanks to one of my viewers who suggested the granny needing help. So she's going to have an adult son, and I'm going to use these joints to create his body because he's going to need to move around the farm and bend. And so I just feel like these joints are going to be really helpful for that. You can also squeeze the metal points on the joint to make the tension tighter or the joint stiffer. So you get a whole bag full of these. I'm not sure how much they cost, but you can go on their website. Again, I'll put the link in the description box below. And this is the number the item number if you wanted to write that down. If you're interested in these, they're really kind of cool. I really like them, so I'm excited to use them. So thank you so much, Gianna. That's Montarsi's miniatures, you guys, if you didn't see part 1 of the doll. So these are going to come in quite handy, and I think they're going to be very helpful and very useful in creating a ball jointed doll, which will be the next doll I make. Okay, so to begin with, I did a lot of searching to see how to create little tiny hands, and I did find a video that worked for me with a really great technique that was pretty simple, because I'm a beginner and I've never created hands before. I do have, experience working with clay, but I've never created hands. So I'll put a link in the description box below if you want to check that out. And keep in mind that all the reference videos that I do link throughout the whole entire process of making the doll, I am actually scaling the parts and process down to the needs of the doll. So some of these things, I'm changing the sizes in some of the parts from some of the videos that I've referenced. So just keep that in mind if you decide to go in to try and work with some of these videos that I'm linking, that I'm not going with what they're doing, but I'm taking the technique and just using it to my needs. So I started with these tiny little carrot shapes for fingers, and the shorter they are, the easier they are to work with. So the second piece that I made was probably a little bit too long, and this is probably one of the attempts that I made, but I just wanted to show you how I got there. I did make several attempts, but the process is the same. So some of the footage that I'm going to be showing you will be from previous attempts, but the same steps. So creating these tiny little carrot shapes, I'm very heavy-handed, so it was very difficult to create the hands and the fingers and work with them, but I am trying to keep a happy medium as far as not too thin, not too thick. I want them to be pliable without being too flexible, so that when I'm working with the hands, they're not breaking on me. So it took a lot of practice to get to that point, and this whole process of making the hands took lots of practice. But you want to keep it wider on the bottom, just like a carrot shape. And honestly, tiny friends, this was the simplest way for a beginner, in my mind, to create little miniature hands. And once you get that basic shape, where you go from there is totally up to you, whether you want to keep it as is or move on to give much more detail. And creating the hands were quite fun for me. I mean, the process was very long, but when you're creating hands, it's much like creating a face. You can give the hands so much detail and character. I feel like the two major body parts of a human body that have the most characters are the face and the hands. So that's where I'm actually going to be adding most of the details while I'm creating the Ol'Lady. So now I'm going to, once I get the carrots all done, I'm going to start to rank them and add them together. So I'm just going to stick them together like the fingers, and I am looking at my hand while I'm doing this process, and seeing, the lengths of the fingers and where they're going, and I'm just beginning to stick them all together. And then I'm going to take a thin layer of clay and start to apply it to the palms, to the back of the hand, and to the palm of the hand, the other side of the hand. And I'm really sorry if some of this is out of the frame, because it was very difficult to work underneath the camera and keep this under the camera. I have my super glasses on, which is my headset with my magnifying lenses, and it was hard for me to see how clear the footage was on the screen without putting my regular glasses on, and I had to keep switching back and forth. So it was pretty difficult because my camera is sitting on the table next to me and not above me. But I began to work on the palms, and I'm just smoothing down the clay very lightly. I had to really learn how to be super light-handed while I was working with this clay, which taught me some good tips and tricks. So just applying it and manipulating it around the palms and through the fingers. And I'm going to do this process um, the entire time as I'm working on the basic shape. And I'm just creating a basic shape right now. So going in between the fingers, smoothing that piece down to blend it into the previous piece that's already there. And also keeping the fingers or at a good distance apart from each other so that they're not sticking to each other while I'm working with them. Because once you get your basic shape, you can then start to pose the hand and the fingers any way you want. And I kept getting ahead of myself and wanting to pose them and wanting to add detail, and I had to keep starting over. So a good thing is to just focus on the basic shape, and that was very difficult for me. So I had to really have some self-discipline when it came to this part because I just kept getting ahead of myself. Also, another good thing to remember is trying to keep these pieces super thin because as you're adding the clay, you're building the hand, and it's really easy to get out of scale. So another thing that I learned while creating these hands was trying to keep my pieces very thin so that I can stay in scale. Okay, so this is what it's beginning to look like, and I'm still working on the basic shape. I'm still comparing it to the cosplay hand. I'm going to pre-bake them before beginning to add the age on the outside of the hands. But once you get that firmness that you're comfortable with, and it's got a nice firmness to it, you can begin to add your details. I'm going to add details to the palm of the hand before pre-bake just to eliminate an additional step. I want to focus more on the aging and the outside of the hands after I pre-bake. But this is the second hand. So now I've got a pair, and now I'm going to begin referencing the first hand that I made in comparison with the second hand. Another thing is if your fingers are too thin or too skinny, just roll a very skinny little tiny snake and apply it to the fingers, and then you can lightly smooth and blend that in to make your finger a little bit more firmer and thicker. Okay, so here's what I have so far, and I still need to do a little bit of work and also a little bit more details to the inside of the hands. But I'm going to pre-bake them for about 5 to 7 minutes and then come back to add the aging on the outside of the hands. And this way they'll be nice and firm. I won't have to worry about ruining my fingers or positions. These are the two tools that I use just to create the basic shape. I will be using a few more tools for the details, but just to get that basic shape, I only use those two tools. So now that my hands are baked, I'm going to show you how easy it is to drill a hole. I'm going to insert a wire in this hand so that I have a little more to hold on to while I'm working with the details. And all I've done was taken my hand drill and just drilled a little hole in the very middle, and this actually is going to get cut down some later on so that I can create the forearms to be equal with each other. So I end up cutting this down to the basic hand shape. But I just wanted to show you how simple it was to drill a hole into the baked clay. Okay, so to begin applying the clay for the aging, I have to remember that I'm still building onto this hand. So I have to keep that in mind so that I don't go out of scale. So I've taken tiny bits of clay and I've smushed them as flat as I can get them, like super thin, like skin slices. Very, very thin, almost transparent. So I just wanted to show you how thin the pieces were that I was adding on to the hand for the aging. And I'm only going to add the clay to where I want the details to be. I'm not going to be covering the whole entire hand. So just where I want to add the details, very, very, very micro thin. You can see how thin it is. And this is all I'm really going to need to achieve that detail that I'm going to add. So I'll just use as many pieces as it takes, but making sure that they're very, very micro thin. I'm going to be just using my silicone tip with the point on it. And what I'm doing to create the wrinkles is just pushing the clay around into place. And that creates little wrinkles and creases in the skin. So I'm just pushing that around into place. And I'll tell you, the best doll sculptor that I have come across that creates aged dolls is Karen Baker from Curious Mondo. If you guys don't know who she is, look her up. Connect with Curious Mondo. Sometimes they do free online courses, and I registered for a 3-day course. It was a free online course with Karen Baker, and she was creating an old lady elf, I think it was. But she really explains how to get those details in the aged skin, why the features come to be the way they are, and helps you understand so that you can remember when you're creating these folds and creases why they're in certain places. Phenomenal, phenomenal. After doing 1 day of that course and never sculpting a head in my life, I created the head of the old person that you see in my intro to my videos. So that little clay head was just after 1 day of the free online course with Karen Baker at Curious Mondo. And you can also purchase the courses to keep so that you can keep it and replay it as much as you like. Definitely a great, great community and place to learn. Curious Mondo. They do all sorts of different types of art. They have different types of artists. You can find different types of classes, and they do lots of free online courses. You just have to look at their schedule, register for their course, and tune in. So very helpful, very educational, and I learned so much just from that 1 day. And I didn't really catch the other 2 days, but that 1 day was really crucial. I learned so much. So definitely, definitely something to look into if you're thinking about sculpting. And Karen Baker is definitely the place to learn how to create this aging in the skin. So just pushing it around. I do create a few micro snakes for the creases and the wrinkles around the wrist later on. But for the most part, to get them folds and creases in the skin, I'm just pushing this clay right around into place to where I want it to be. Another good place to learn how to sculpt would be Krieger's Studio. Uh, that's Creager, Krieger Studios. Another phenomenal place to learn when sculpting more realistic dolls. Um, there's tons of fabulous sculptors if you're going for a more realistic look, which that's what I thrive to do. So definitely lots to learn out there from talented, phenomenal artists that uh, enjoy sharing what they know and teaching you these skills. So this is what it's looking like so far. And what I've done was um, gone back and forth. If I got tired of working on one hand or it got frustrating or it was a bit too tedious or, you know, I was just getting tired of it, I would set it down. If it was getting too soft or, whatever the case was, I would set it down, let it harden up a bit and move on to the next hand. So I did a lot of back and forth, coming and going, and also a lot of breaks. Give yourself a lot of breaks when doing something like this, and also have a lot of patience with yourself because this is not something that happens overnight. Even if you are a natural or talented or gifted, I watched a lot of artists doing the same, you know, realm of work. So, finding artists that are working in the same things that you're interested in or you want to achieve helps big time. And having a lot of patience with yourself, tiny friends. So, definitely is crucial to this. Um, if you want to go really realistic. This the results have completely shocked me, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did with the fingers and then move on to the nails. So for the fingers, I've did the same thing with the very micro thin layers of skin. And I'm just going in with the tip of the silicone tool and just pressing in some indents and creating some wrinkles within the knuckles and around the fingers. I'm also using my X-Acto knife or my craft blade to create some of those really fine lines in there that you'll get. And I've been using my own hands all along as far as looking at the folds and creases and the wrinkles, and then um, I just added to that. Like I just made that more dramatic for her hands. So look at your own hands, find some photos to reference, and I really didn't use photos up to this point so far. I looked at a couple, but I was really just basically referencing my own hands. Now, when it comes to the face, I will be using photos for references, definitely. But for these parts, I really didn't need them. I can use my own body parts and then just exaggerate, the details. So I am just trying to be very light because these pieces are very thin. So um, once I get to where I want it to look or the amount of detail I want, I can go back in and start smoothing down any areas that need to be smoothed. But here you can see I'm using the back of my X-Acto blade, but I also use the blade itself in some of the parts. So just different ways to create the details in the fingers. Now I could have definitely stopped at the basic shape and that would have been fine, but I have a certain vision in my head and I really want her to be as realistic as I can possibly get her um, on my level anyways. So you don't have to go this extreme, but if that's something that you want to do, just definitely keep in mind you need a lot of patience with yourself. Give yourself a lot of credit and give yourself a lot of time, because a lot of time does go into this. I can see why these types of dolls are so expensive and why I have to make my own. I can never afford a, a doll that's sculpted, that's so realistic. But I'm going to pre-bake them again before fusing the forearms. And before I do that, I want to get the nails on. And I have some experience in the past working with acrylic nails. So this technique that I'm going to do is kind of like the same thing, only I'm going to be using the clay, and I'm going to roll a micro snake, very tiny micro snake, cut little bits from that. Once I get these little bits cut down, I'm going to take my silicone tool and I'm just going to flatten down one side more so than the other. Now I'm not flattening them completely, I'm just pressing them down a little flatter, and they look like little nails. Then I'm going to take my liquid Sculpey, and this bottle is so old, I must have had it for so many years, but it's still working for me, and it's like full. I don't use it often, and I don't even know if this stuff expires, but it's pretty old, you can see. I've had it for, I think since I started, which is back in 2014, but it's still good. So I'm going to use this and just apply little dabs of it on the fingertips. Then I'm going to pick up a little piece of clay and lay it down on the liquid Sculpey. Now the liquid Sculpey is translucent. It looks like tacky glue or PVA glue, so it turns the clay white while it's still raw. But once I bake it, the clay goes right back to the normal color, which is the color of the hand. So I just wanted to show you what I'm doing with this now while you can see them, because once I bake it, you won't really see the fingernails unless I turn the hands around. You'll see them when I paint them, of course, but they kind of blend right in. So I'm just taking my tool and I'm actually just shaping the nail around the finger, flattening it out some around the cuticle, shaping it a little to make it look like there's a real nail there. And I turn the hand over and then just use this, kind of a little difficult to explain, but I use my fingertip and lay the nail lightly, very lightly and gentle while I'm doing this, on my fingertip, and take the silicone point and press it, just give it a little press, and that actually gives the nail a curve, so that when you flip the hands over, you see that they actually curve like a nail does, or a acrylic nail does anyways. These aren't acrylic in her world, they're her real nails, because that wasn't a thing back then, but I'm trying to get them to look as natural as I can. Now, she's a farmer wife, and she, works hard with her hands. So her hands are going to look a little older, because the more you work with your hands, the older they're going to look. But she's an old battle axe, tiny friends. She is. She loves her womanly things. She loves her nails painted. She loves her jewelry. She loves her magazines and all her woman parts. So, she, just because she's a hard farmer's, wife, and a hard work, she's hard working on the farm, she still loves to be a lady. And, well, she loves to look as ladylike as she can. We'll just say that, because she is an old battle axe. And if you don't know what a battle axe is, they're those types of women that are bossy and they're in charge of their lives, and you can't tell them what to do, but they sure can tell you where to go, right? So that's who she is. That's what kind of woman she is. She's, a pretty strong-minded and opinionated woman. But I'm going to hook her nails up. I love her so much, and I wanted to do something special for her, so I'm going to give her some nice fingernails. This is what they're looking like so far, and I am getting ready to bake them. And I could have used a different color clay. I could have made it look like they were natural on the nail bed and then have a white nail tip if I wasn't going to paint them. I probably would have went that route, but I am definitely painting these nails for this old battle axe. So now I'm going to put them in the oven and bake them for a few more minutes, and then I'm going to create the forearms. So just giving you a good look at what they look like before you can't really see them until I paint them. Okay, so I got started on the forearms, and creating the forearms was basically like going back to the drawing board. It was a lot of trial and error, a lot of redos, and I've gotten to the point with this arm that it's workable. So I just need to tweak it and give it some more details. I'm using the silicone tip, and I'm just making some indents and pushing the skin around or the clay around. But I really did try to search for some reference photos for the forearms, and I could not find any that would help me. I don't know if I'm just really bad at doing searches, but I had to basically just pretty much go with what was in my head. So I am just trying to create what would look like an aged forearm, and also remember that the forearm has a specific shape to it where it's more narrow near the wrist and a little bit wider and flatter towards the elbow. So I'm keeping that in mind as I am adding these details in. And I'm going to fast forward to the second hand and arm, and then move on to the coloring and shading. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on the forearms. This is the second hand that I had to actually cut down because the piece of the forearm that was there was just too bulky and it was causing conflict. I couldn't get the two forearms to be equal with each other. So I cut it down, and I will be leaving the wire on for added support, and I'll just trim that down. But I'm basically just doing the same thing. I've created the wrist bones. I've created some flappy, loose hanging skin. I've created some wrinkles around the wrist. I'm doing some indents and creating the forearm to look where you can kind of see the bone around the top on both sides, where is when you get older the skin starts to sag and the fat starts to sag a little, and it's thinner on the top part and it starts to create that bone shape. And I'm also remembering to keep the shape of the forearm where it's more narrow towards the hand and the wrist and wider and a little flatter towards the elbow. So I just wanted to give you a quick look at some of this process, but I have to move on because time is just moving forward and I still have to do the coloring and shading part and applying these arms to the doll. So I'm going to go on to that part, and you can see a little bit of the detail that's happening, but I did do some more work to these forearms before giving them their final bake. Okay, so this is what they're looking like. They're all baked, they're completed, and I just wanted to give you a good look at what they look like now before I add the coloring so you can see the difference. So you can see the skin, the thinner skin hanging down, and they fit really nice and tight. I don't even have to glue them on the wire. They're not going anywhere. If I want to rotate them a little, I can. This is the back. And I just love them so much. Her hands, I love her hands and her arms. Again, the results have really shocked me, tiny friends, honestly. I definitely tend to underestimate myself. I never know what it's going to come out to look like when I have these visions and ideas. Okay, so I'm going to speed up this process and come back when it is nail painting time, and then we can see the final results.
You must remember this, a kiss is still a kiss, a sigh is just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. And when two lovers woo, they still say I love you, on that you can rely. No matter what the future brings as time goes by. Moonlight and love songs never out of date, hearts full of passion, jealousy and hate. Woman needs man and man must have his mate, that no one can deny. It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by. This day and age we're living in gives cause for apprehension, with speed the new invention and things like third dimension. Yet we get a trifle weary with Mr. Einstein's theory, so we must get down to earth at times, relax, relieve the tension. No matter what the progress or what may yet be proved, the simple facts of life are such, they cannot be removed. You must remember this, a kiss is still a kiss, a sigh is just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. When two lovers woo, they still say I love you, on that you can rely. No matter what the future brings as time goes by. Moonlight and love songs never out of date, hearts full of passion, jealousy and hate. Woman needs man, and man must have his mate, that no one can deny. It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by.
Okay, tiny friends, so this is what they're looking like with some color on them. They're not so pinkish anymore. I did try to use a little bit of a bluish green color to run along the veins, very, very lightly, a very hint. And I also tried to add a little bit of gray into that skin tone, because sometimes when the hands get older, they get those darker spots and the skin color will start to have that grayish look on them. So I did try to add that. You can't really, I don't know if you can really see it much, but in person you can see more of it. So I'm going to paint her hands, or her nails, and I'm using this metallic red by Folk Art. I figure this would be a perfect color to use as far as the metallic, because then it'll look like there's a top coat or a gloss on it. It'll shine and shimmer. And I debated on whether I wanted to go with red or pink, and I just felt like red was more of her personality than pink. I've always been really bad. I did work with nails for a very short time. I did more hair in the salon than nails, but I was always really bad at painting a solid nail. I was really good at doing French manicures, but when it came to painting the whole nail, I was always so bad at it. But she kind of does remind me of my grandmother. My grandmother, now that I think of it, was like an old battle axe. She loved her nails done, she loved her jewelry, and she was definitely an old battle axe. Like, you cannot tell her what to do. Um, but oh my goodness, I love holding her little hand. It's just, it feels so good and it's so cute. And I just love that feeling of being able to hold her little hand. So this is what they look like. And one more thing these hands need, tiny friends. I have something super special for her. And now this might not fit as far as her history of being a farm woman and a hardworking woman on the farm, but because I love her so much and she's super special to me, I'm going to make her a ring. I'm going to put a big rock on that finger. Okay, so I have a piece of jewelry here that actually looks like a real, it looks like it has real diamonds in it. It's got really nice cuts and they really bling. And I also have some gemstones, some rhinestones for nails that don't look as realistic. So I'm going to go with the big blingy rock. Although the ruby gemstone looked really good and I couldn't decide if I wanted to use the ruby or this one, but I'm going to go with this one because uh, she needs something really nice for her big debut, right? And so this is just a gift from me to her as a wedding ring from her husband. And I know it might not go with what she's going to look like when I put her clothes on, but I just couldn't help myself, tiny friends. So she's got this big old rock, and now I know it would look way better if I was making this fancy, poshy lady, but I love her so much, and this is my very first doll, and so she's super special, so she can have this. Okay, tiny friends, so here are the final results of her hands and her forearms, and I just want to say one more thing. I've been asked about her name, and I am going to do something super special for her big debut when it comes to her name, tiny friends. So make sure to tune in for that. Also, I want to thank you all for being here and for subscribing and choosing to come along with me on my journey and as I create this beautiful old lady that's coming to life. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you're subscribing, don't forget to hit that top bell notification button to be notified every time I upload a new project. And when I come back, I'll be creating her legs and her removable feet. So she is coming together. She is getting all her parts, and I'm super excited to have her here. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, give it a thumbs up, and until next time, tiny friends, you all have a lovely day, and I will see you all on the mini side. Bye-bye.